There's a particular kind of betrayal that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a raised voice or a slammed door. It builds itself slowly, methodically, the way a surgeon builds a career, with precision, with patience, with the steady confidence of someone who believes they will never be caught. And what makes this kind of betrayal so devastating isn't the moment you discover it. It's the realization of how long it was hiding in plain sight, wearing the face of someone you loved, sitting across from you at the dinner table every single night. I want to tell you a story today about a man who thought he had built the perfect life, and a woman who quietly decided to take it apart, piece by piece, in the most devastating way imaginable. This is the story of Dr. Richard Calloway, and of Eleanor, and of everything that happens when the wrong person underestimates the right woman. Imagine for a second that you are standing in a ballroom. It is December in Boston, the kind of cold that presses itself against the windows of the Fairmont Copley Plaza while 500 people in black tie move through candlelit tables, champagne in hand. The easy laughter of people who have never worried about a bill in their lives rising up to the chandeliers. This is the North Shore Medical Center annual charity gala, the most important social evening in the Boston medical calendar. And on the stage at the front of that ballroom, a man is about to receive the Surgeon of the Year award, the highest recognition his hospital can bestow. That man is Dr. Richard Calloway, cardiothoracic surgeon, Harvard Medical School, 15 years of marriage, the kind of face that appears in hospital brochures. He is standing backstage right now, straightening his bow tie, rehearsing the opening line of an acceptance speech he has been quietly writing in his head for months. He is, by every visible measure, a man at the absolute pinnacle of his life. And somewhere in that ballroom, seated at a table near the front, is his wife Eleanor. Midnight blue gown, hair up, the expression of a woman attending a pleasant evening. She is about to walk to that microphone, and she is about to end him. But to understand what happens in that ballroom, to understand why it is so complete, so precise, so utterly without mercy, you have to go back. You have to understand who these people were before the gala. You have to understand how 15 years of a marriage can carry, right alongside the love and the laughter and the family photographs, a 10-year lie of almost incomprehensible scale. So let's go back to Boston, 2009. Richard Calloway had just completed his fellowship at Massachusetts General Hospital. He was 36 years old, technically brilliant, and by his own private accounting, frustrated. He had the talent, he had the credentials. What he did not have was capital. The private practice he imagined, the kind that attracted Boston's wealthiest patients, the kind that would make him not just respected, but untouchable, that required money he did not possess. His family had been working class. His path through medicine had been financed by scholarships, loans, and 15-hour shifts. He was exceptional at what he did, and he knew it. And it made the gap between where he was and where he believed he deserved to be feel like a kind of injustice. Eleanor Hartford did not walk into his life so much as materialize at the edge of it. Introduced at a hospital benefit by a mutual colleague, effortlessly composed in a way that Richard later described to a friend as like she had already decided exactly who she was and was no longer interested in being anyone else. She was 32, Wellesley, Wharton, the youngest daughter of the Hartford family, old Boston money, the kind that doesn't advertise itself. Her grandfather had built office buildings. Her mother chaired cultural boards. Eleanor herself had been quietly running the family investment portfolio since her late 20s, with a discipline that made her advisors nervous in the best possible way. She was brilliant, contained, and, in the way of very capable people who have arranged their lives with great care, slightly lonely. Richard understood people. It was one of his genuine gifts, separate from the surgical talent, older than the medical career. He understood what people needed to feel seen, and he was very good at providing it. He did not approach Eleanor as a project. He approached her as a curiosity, which is more effective, and she responded to it. By their fourth conversation, she was telling him things she did not typically share with people she had known for less than a year. They were married in 2010, A ceremony at the Hartford estate on Cape Cod. String quartet, 200 guests, flowers that cost more than most Americans earn in a year. And because Eleanor loved him, and because she believed, with genuine conviction, that his talent deserved the platform it had never been given, she did what the Hartfords have always done with things they find worth investing in. She funded him. $800,000, moved through a family trust, used to build Richard's patient portfolio, to cover 3 years of overhead before his reputation could sustain itself, to accelerate everything that would have otherwise taken another decade of grinding. She never mentioned it in arguments. She never used it as leverage. It was simply what you did for someone you had chosen. It was love, expressed in the language she was most fluent in. By 2015, Richard Calloway was one of the preeminent cardiac surgeons in New England. His name was known. His waiting list was long. His salary was extraordinary. And he was, by that point, 2 years into an affair with Sarah Novak. Sarah was the charge nurse on the cardiac surgery floor at North Shore, 33 years old at the time it began. Efficient, trusted, the operational backbone of a unit that ran on precision and could not afford mistakes. She had worked with Richard for 4 years before anything changed between them. The accounts of how it began are, as these things always are, banal. Long shifts, specific intimacy, a dinner in the hospital cafeteria that lasted 3 hours when it should have lasted 45 minutes. Have you ever noticed how the most catastrophic decisions in a person's life rarely feel like decisions in the moment? They feel like something that was simply happening, like weather, like a current. Richard Calloway did not sit down one evening and decide to destroy his marriage and his career. He slid into it, step by step, each small compromise making the next one feel less significant, until he was standing in a life so thoroughly separate from his official one that maintaining it required the same focused energy he brought to the operating room. By 2015, the affair was established. By 2016, it had become something more elaborate. Richard leased an apartment in the South End, a 2-bedroom on the 22nd floor with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city that Sarah reportedly loved. He structured the lease through a limited liability company he named Calvert Property Holdings, established through an attorney he paid in cash from a personal account Eleanor did not know existed. On Tuesday and Thursday evenings, when he told Eleanor he was finishing late rounds, or reviewing cases, or attending a department meeting, he was in that apartment. Sarah cooked dinner. They had a life there, a parallel domestic reality, complete and self-contained. And how did he fund it? How does a man finance a second household, a secret apartment, travel, dinners, weekend trips to Montreal that appear on no credit card statement his wife might see? You take it slowly. You take it in amounts small enough to blur against the noise of a busy shared account. Eleanor had established a joint household account, generous because she was always generous, and Richard had full access. Over time, the transfers became a system. $1,500 here, $2,000 there. Sometimes routed directly to Calvert Property Holdings, sometimes through the private account he kept invisible. Over 10 years, patient and methodical, he moved approximately $430,000 out of their shared finances and into the infrastructure of a life he was living without her. $430,000. From the woman who had given him $800,000 to build the career he was now using to fund a secret with someone else. Eleanor did not know. She trusted him with the household accounts the way you trust someone you have chosen to build a life with. She was managing a $60 million family investment portfolio. She was on the advisory board of a children's hospital. She had 1,000 things to track, and the monthly household account was Richard's territory. She had no reason to look. She had no reason to suspect. The marriage was not a performance of happiness. They were, genuinely, on most ordinary days, a functioning and affectionate couple. They traveled together. They had dinner parties. They had the brownstone in Beacon Hill and the summer plans and the easy shorthand of two people who had been together long enough to finish each other's sentences. Which is what made March of 2023 so quietly catastrophic. It was a Tuesday. Richard was at the hospital. Eleanor was working from home, pulling together documents for their annual financial review with the family accountant. The household printer was in Richard's home office. She went to refill the paper tray. In the output tray, already printed, already sitting there, was an email. Richard had been printing from his laptop. A phone call had interrupted him, apparently, and he had simply walked out of the room and left it there. The email was from Sarah. The subject line read, "This weekend?" The body was short, warm, deeply familiar. She referenced the apartment, called it home. She referenced an anniversary they had apparently observed the previous month. She closed with her initial and 3 small X's. Eleanor read it once. She placed it face down on the desk. She walked back to her own office, and she closed the door. Now here's the part of this story that I find most extraordinary. Not the betrayal. Betrayal, for all its ugliness, is commonplace. What is not commonplace is what Eleanor Hartford Callaway did next. Most people in that moment, and this is not a criticism, this is simply human, most people break. They cry, or they rage, or they call their sister, or they confront their spouse the moment he walks through the door, propelled by a grief that cannot wait. Eleanor did none of these things. She opened her laptop. She opened a new encrypted drive she set up that same evening, and she began, with the meticulous patience of someone who has managed complex financial structures for 2 decades, to document everything. Within 48 hours, she had engaged a private investigator through a referral from an attorney she knew socially, someone entirely separate from any lawyer connected to Richard or their shared life. Within a week, she had authorized a forensic accounting review through a CPA she had used years before for a separate family matter. She told Richard nothing. She cooked dinner. She attended a benefit gala on his arm. She listened to him talk about his patients and his cases and his department over weeknight suppers, and she gave nothing away. The forensic picture assembled over 6 weeks. The LLC, the South End apartment, the private account, the systematic transfers going back 9 years. The Montreal hotel charges that corresponded, date for date, with a medical conference Richard claimed annually to attend, but had never, according to the conference's own registration records, actually appeared at. The private investigator produced a file of documented meetings, photographs, a timeline. Eleanor sat with all of it. She organized it into a document that her attorney later described as the most comprehensively prepared financial disclosure he had seen in 30 years of family law. And then she made a phone call. Not to a divorce attorney, to her investment manager. Here is something you need to understand about Eleanor Hartford. The Hartford family had held a minority stake in North Shore Medical Center since 2011, 14%, acquired quietly as part of a broader healthcare portfolio, one of dozens of positions, never discussed at dinner parties. Eleanor knew this because Eleanor managed the portfolio. What she also knew, because she had been paying attention, because Eleanor always paid attention, was that North Shore's majority shareholder, a private equity group called Meridian Health Partners, had been quietly exploring an exit. The hospital was profitable, but capital intensive. Meridian wanted out. Discreetly. No public announcement. Eleanor had known about this for 4 months. She had stored it away, as she stored everything, in the part of her mind reserved for things that might become useful. Through a newly established investment structure, a fund nested inside a Delaware family trust, established by attorneys who had no connection to her publicly known identity, Eleanor initiated acquisition discussions with Meridian Health Partners. The fund was named Aldgate Capital Partners. There was no Hartford name on any document. There was nothing to trace back to her. The negotiations were concluded in November 2023. Aldgate Capital Partners acquired 53% of North Shore Medical Center. Eleanor Hartford Callaway was, through a structure her husband had never heard of, the majority owner of the hospital where he worked, where Sarah worked, where he had built the reputation that was currently the only significant thing standing between him and catastrophe. He went to work every day. He performed surgeries. He attended department meetings. He accepted the admiration of his colleagues. He had dinner in the South End apartment on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. He had no idea. December 14th, 2023. The Fairmont Copley Plaza. The ballroom was exactly what it always was. Expensive, warm, the particular confidence of a room full of people who are accustomed to being in rooms like this. Eleanor arrived on time. Her gown was midnight blue, structured, elegant. She found her table. She greeted colleagues. She was pleasant and composed, and, to anyone watching, simply the accomplished wife of tonight's honoree. Richard worked the room. He was animated, pleased, the way men are when they are about to be publicly recognized for something they have genuinely earned. His surgical talent was real. Whatever else is true about Richard Calloway, he was gifted in the operating room. His colleagues admired him. Tonight was a celebration of that. The dinner moved through its courses. The hospital's CEO, a man named Garrett Walsh, gave opening remarks. 3 preliminary awards were presented, and then Garrett returned to the podium for what everyone assumed would be a standard introduction. He said, "Before we move to our final award this evening, I've been asked to make a brief announcement regarding North Shore's ownership structure. As of last month, our board has welcomed a new majority stakeholder. I'd like to invite our new majority shareholder to join me at the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor Hartford Calloway." The applause was polite, curious. 500 people watching a woman they knew primarily as Richard Calloway's wife walk to the microphone of a hospital they had just learned she controlled. Richard, from his position near the stage, had gone the color of old chalk. Eleanor thanked Garrett. She said a few words about her family's long-standing commitment to healthcare in Boston. She was warm, precise, and brief. And then she said, "Before we present tonight's final award, there is a matter of institutional responsibility I need to address. As the majority owner of this hospital, I take seriously our obligations to our patients, to our staff, and to the integrity of this institution. I have authorized an independent forensic audit of certain financial irregularities that have come to my attention. The findings are significant. I will be providing the complete documentation to the appropriate authorities tomorrow morning." The room shifted, the particular silence of 500 people simultaneously realizing something extraordinary is occurring. "These irregularities," Eleanor continued, her voice entirely level, "involve the systematic misappropriation of funds over a period of approximately 10 years, used to finance a private residence and sustain a personal relationship between 2 members of our staff." She reached beneath the podium. She had placed 3 envelopes there before dinner. "I am tonight exercising my authority as majority shareholder to terminate the employment contracts of Dr. Richard Calloway and charge nurse Sarah Novak, effective immediately. Human Resources has been notified. Security will facilitate their exit." She turned. Richard was standing. His chair had scraped back. His mouth was open. She looked at him across that ballroom, across 15 years, across the $800,000, across the $430,000, across 10 years of Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and she held out the 3rd envelope. "Richard, these are your divorce papers. They have already been filed. My attorney will be in contact." She set all 3 envelopes on the podium. She looked out at 500 people and said, "Thank you. Please enjoy the rest of your evening." And she walked off that stage without looking back once. The silence that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then the room erupted in a sound that witnesses later described as something between a gasp and a roar. The financial file Eleanor delivered the following morning required very little supplemental investigation. The district attorney's office later noted, in language that contained what might have been professional admiration, that the documentation was among the most complete they had received. Every transfer, every LLC filing, every lease document, every hotel receipt. 10 years, organized with the precision of a woman who had spent 2 decades making complex things clear. Richard was charged with wire fraud and financial fraud from a marital estate. His attorneys were expensive and capable. The Massachusetts Board of Registration in Medicine declined to wait for the criminal resolution. His license was suspended and subsequently revoked. Without his license, without a salary, without the institution that had been the architecture of his identity, Richard Calloway discovered something he had perhaps always known but never fully reckoned with: that virtually everything he had was downstream of Eleanor. The talent was his. The rest had been built on her foundation, and she had simply recalled it. Sarah Novak left the state within 2 months of the gala. She took a travel nursing position. Richard sent her a series of unanswered messages during the weeks after December 14th. They are part of the public court record. The divorce settlement concluded 18 months later. Eleanor retained North Shore Medical Center. She retained the Beacon Hill brownstone. She retained her family investments, entirely intact. The courts ordered recovery of the misappropriated funds, and she recovered the substantial majority of what had been taken. The remainder she considered the cost of information, the price of learning, finally and completely, what she had been living alongside. I've been asked sometimes what I think Eleanor felt when she walked out of that ballroom. I think the honest answer is that I don't know, and I'm not sure anyone does. There is no version of this story where 15 years of a marriage were simply pretend, where some portion of what she had believed wasn't real, where the grief wasn't also real. These things coexist in ways that are deeply uncomfortable to acknowledge. But I think she also felt something else. I think she felt the particular clarity that comes from having been, at the moment it mattered most, completely and exactly herself. She had not panicked. She had not reacted from pain. She had done what Eleanor Hartford had always done. She had assessed, organized, and executed, with a precision that no one in that ballroom would ever forget. Richard had spent 10 years making one foundational miscalculation. He had looked at a woman who funded his beginning, who trusted him with her money and her loyalty and 15 years of her life, and he had decided, consciously or not, that she was a soft target, that her trust was a vulnerability, that he could build something secret and sustainable right alongside everything she had given him. He was wrong. He was wrong about all of it. The most expensive mistake a person can make is to confuse someone's generosity for their limit. Eleanor Hartford had been watching and calculating and waiting, not because she planned to use it, but because that is simply who she is. And when the moment came, she was ready in a way that he never saw coming, because it never occurred to him that someone who loved him could also be, simultaneously, the most formidable adversary he would ever face. There is a lesson in this story, if you want one, though I'll leave it to you to decide what it is. Maybe it's about the nature of trust and how catastrophically it can be misplaced. Maybe it's about the particular arrogance of people who mistake the patience of those who love them for permission. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just this: be careful who you underestimate. Be very, very careful who you underestimate.